Sometimes the person everyone throws away is the only one capable of changing an empire. Rain hammered the black SUV as it rolled through the narrow service road behind the Romano estate, where overflowing dumpsters and rusted loading docks hid the uglier side of the city's wealth. Caleb Sterling sat silently in the back seat, his tailored charcoal coat draped neatly across his shoulders while distant thunder echoed between the brick buildings. At only 32 years old, he had already become the undisputed alpha leading the Sterling Syndicate, a man whose reputation was built less on loud threats than on quiet decisions that rarely proved wrong. Tonight had been another exhausting negotiation with the Romano family, their oldest rivals. The meeting had ended with polished smiles, expensive whiskey, and promises nobody truly believed. Caleb had seen enough carefully rehearsed lies to recognize them before they were spoken. As the SUV approached the security gate, something unusual caught his attention. "Stop the car," he said calmly. His driver immediately pressed the brakes. One of the bodyguards looked through the rain-covered windshield. "Boss." Caleb had already opened the door. Between several torn garbage bags near the loading area rested what looked at first like a pile of discarded blankets. Then the shape moved almost imperceptibly. Caleb stepped closer, ignoring the rain soaking the polished leather of his shoes. The closer he came, the clearer the picture became. Curled tightly against the cold concrete was a young Omega, no older than his mid-20s, dressed in oversized clothing that had clearly belonged to someone else. His pale skin was covered with dirt and rainwater, his white anime-like features almost colorless beneath damp silver-blonde hair clinging to his forehead. His breathing remained shallow but steady. One trembling hand still clutched a small silver pendant so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Caleb crouched without saying a word. The Omega flinched immediately, instinctively trying to make himself even smaller. "I am sorry," he whispered so quietly it almost disappeared beneath the rain. "I will not cause trouble." Caleb frowned. Those were not the first words someone should say after being found alone in an alley. They were the words of someone who expected punishment before kindness. One of the bodyguards approached carefully. "Boss, we should leave. This is Romano territory." Caleb never looked away from the Omega. "What is your name?" The young man hesitated for several seconds before answering. "Noah." His voice barely carried enough strength to be heard. "Just Noah." Caleb noticed something else immediately. Noah never looked directly at anyone's face. His eyes remained fixed on the wet pavement, as though making eye contact itself was forbidden. Caleb removed his coat and quietly placed it over Noah's shoulders. Noah startled at the unexpected gesture, his fingers tightening around the pendant. "You do not have to do that," Noah whispered. "It is only a coat." Caleb answered with the same calm tone he used in every difficult negotiation. "No, it is a choice." The bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. This was unlike their alpha. Caleb rarely involved himself in strangers' lives, especially not on enemy ground. The driver lowered his voice. "Boss, this could be a trap." Caleb finally stood. "If it is, then it is a poorly planned one." He extended a hand toward Noah, but did not force him to take it. "Can you stand?" Noah stared at the offered hand with visible uncertainty, as though he had forgotten such a thing was allowed. After several long seconds, he slowly reached forward. His fingers shook the entire time. Caleb helped him to his feet without another word. Noah immediately stepped back, apologizing again. "I can walk. Please do not carry me. I do not want to make anyone angry." That sentence lingered heavily in the cold night air. Caleb simply nodded toward the waiting SUV. "You are coming with us." Noah looked terrified instead of relieved. He glanced once toward the brightly lit Romano mansion behind the security fence, then lowered his head. "If they find out," he whispered. Before he could finish, one of the Sterling bodyguards stepped closer to Caleb, his expression unusually serious. "Boss," he said quietly, "I know who he is. The Romano family calls him their broken toy. They threw him away tonight because they believe he has no value anymore." Caleb looked back at Noah, who stood silently beneath the rain wearing a coat far too large for his thin frame while still refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Then Caleb spoke 4 quiet words that instantly changed everyone's future. "He is leaving here." As the SUV doors closed behind them and the vehicle disappeared into the storm, None of them noticed a security camera mounted above the loading dock, silently recording everything for someone watching inside the Romano estate. Noah did not remember falling asleep inside the SUV. He only remembered waking with a sudden gasp when the vehicle slowed behind a pair of wrought iron gates that silently opened onto the Sterling estate. His first instinct was not curiosity, but panic. He immediately reached for the door handle. "I can leave here," he whispered quickly. "You have already helped me enough." Caleb looked up from the tablet resting on his lap and calmly shook his head. "Nobody is asking you to leave." Noah lowered his eyes at once. "I should not stay where I do not belong." The words carried no resentment, only certainty, as though they had been repeated so many times they had become part of his identity. When the SUV stopped, two house staff members hurried forward with umbrellas. Caleb stepped out first before turning back toward Noah. "Come inside." Noah hesitated for several long seconds before carefully climbing out of the vehicle. Even then, he instinctively remained several steps behind everyone else, keeping his head lowered and quietly apologizing each time he believed he was walking too slowly. Inside the mansion, warm lights reflected across polished hardwood floors while the scent of fresh bread drifted from the kitchen. Everything felt impossibly clean and peaceful. Noah froze near the entrance, unwilling to step farther. One of the staff members smiled kindly. "Would you like some tea?" Noah immediately bowed his head. "I am sorry for causing trouble." The woman blinked in confusion. "I only asked if you were thirsty." Noah looked even more embarrassed. "Sorry." Caleb noticed the exchange without interrupting. Instead, he quietly instructed the housekeeper to prepare a guest room and asked the family physician to stop by in the morning. Noah's shoulders stiffened at the word guest. He seemed unable to believe anyone would describe him that way. A few minutes later, dinner was served in the large dining room. Caleb took his usual seat while another place had been prepared across the table. Noah remained standing near the doorway. "Sit," Caleb said simply. Noah stared at the empty chair as though it belonged to someone far more important. "I can eat later." Caleb looked at him. "Why?" Noah answered honestly. "Because everyone else should finish first." Caleb slowly set down his fork. "There is no everyone else." Noah remained motionless. After another quiet moment, Caleb stood, walked to the empty chair, and gently pulled it back. "This seat was prepared for you." Noah approached with hesitant steps and sat only on the very edge of the chair, keeping his hands folded tightly in his lap. Throughout the meal, he barely touched the food. Each time someone offered him another serving, he politely refused and apologized again. Caleb finally asked, "Do you dislike the food?" Noah looked startled. "No. It is wonderful." "Then why are you not eating?" Noah searched for an answer before quietly admitting, "I am afraid someone else might need it more." The dining room fell silent. Nobody laughed. Nobody corrected him. Caleb simply slid the breadbasket closer. "There is enough for everyone here." Noah slowly reached for a small piece of bread, as though expecting someone to stop him. Nobody did. Later that evening, the family physician completed a routine examination and confirmed that Noah was exhausted, dehydrated, and needed proper rest, regular meals, and time to recover. Before leaving, the physician quietly told Caleb his body will heal. The harder part will be convincing him that he is safe. Caleb nodded without replying. Upstairs, Noah stood inside the guest room prepared for him. The room overlooked the gardens and contained a neatly made bed, a reading chair, fresh towels, and a nightstand with a small lamp already glowing softly. Noah remained near the doorway instead of entering. When Caleb appeared a few moments later, he found Noah carefully removing the blanket from the bed. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked. Noah answered without looking up. "I will sleep on the floor. The bed should stay clean." Caleb walked into the room, picked up the blanket, and quietly placed it back where it belonged. Nobody sleeps on the floor in this house. Noah's breathing became uneven. "I might ruin something." Caleb's voice remained calm. "It is only furniture." Noah finally looked up, confusion replacing fear for the first time. "Why are you being kind to me?" Caleb considered the question longer than Noah expected. "Because someone should have been kind to you a long time ago." Noah had no answer. After Caleb quietly closed the bedroom door behind him, Noah sat on the edge of the bed without moving, his fingers still wrapped tightly around the small silver pendant hidden beneath his shirt. He slowly opened the pendant for the first time since arriving. Inside rested a faded photograph of two smiling adults standing beside a little white house, and behind the photograph, almost invisible beneath years of wear, was an engraved Sterling family crest. Noah barely slept that first night. Every unfamiliar sound pulled him awake, and every time he opened his eyes, he expected someone to order him out of the room. Instead, the quiet mansion remained peaceful. Sunlight gradually spilled through the bedroom curtains, painting soft golden lines across the hardwood floor. For several minutes, he simply sat on the edge of the bed, unsure whether he was actually allowed to remain there. His fingers instinctively wrapped around the silver pendant resting beneath his shirt before he quietly folded the blanket with perfect precision, smoothing every wrinkle as though preparing the room for someone more important. Downstairs, the aroma of freshly baked bread and coffee drifted through the dining room. Noah hesitated outside the doorway, listening carefully before entering. Caleb was already seated with several folders spread neatly across the table while reading reports from the previous night's meeting. Without looking up, he calmly said, "Good morning, Noah." Noah immediately lowered his head. "Good morning. I am sorry I woke up late." Caleb glanced at the clock before returning to his papers. "It is 7:15. You did not wake up late." Noah looked confused. Really? The housekeeper soon arrived carrying breakfast. She smiled warmly before placing a plate in front of Noah. Fresh scrambled eggs, toast, sliced fruit, and a small bowl of oatmeal filled the table with comforting warmth. Noah stared at the food but made no move to eat. Instead, he quietly stood and picked up his plate. Caleb looked up. "Where are you going?" Noah answered honestly. "I should eat in the kitchen." "Why?" "Guests should not sit here." Caleb folded the report in front of him. "Yesterday you believed you should sleep on the floor. Today you believe you should hide while eating. Tomorrow what will you apologize for?" Noah lowered his eyes without answering. Caleb pointed gently toward the chair. "Sit." Noah obeyed. They ate in silence for several minutes before Caleb noticed Noah carefully breaking each piece of toast into smaller portions. "Are you saving it?" Caleb asked. Noah nodded almost imperceptibly. For later, Caleb looked toward the nearly full breadbasket. "There will still be food later." Noah whispered the same answer he had likely repeated throughout most of his life. "Sometimes there is not." Caleb said nothing more. Instead, he quietly pushed the breadbasket even closer to Noah before returning to his breakfast. After the meal, Caleb instructed one of the staff members to take Noah shopping for clothing since everything he owned had been ruined by the rain. Noah immediately protested. "I do not need new clothes." Caleb looked at him calmly. "The shoes you are wearing are falling apart." Noah glanced downward. The soles had nearly separated completely. "They still work." Caleb stood and walked toward the front entrance where a new pair of simple sneakers and neatly folded casual clothing had already been placed on a bench. "Then keep the old shoes if you want," he said. "But you also deserve a pair that fits." Noah froze. Nobody had ever presented him with something without expecting repayment. He carefully touched the sleeve of the soft cream-colored sweater resting on top of the folded clothes as though it might disappear if he held it too tightly. Later that afternoon, while Caleb attended meetings inside his office, Noah quietly wandered into the mansion's library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves surrounded the room while sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the gardens. Noah stood motionless, overwhelmed by the number of books. He reached toward one carefully bound novel before immediately pulling his hand back without touching it. "You can read it." Caleb's voice came unexpectedly from the doorway. Noah turned so quickly, he nearly dropped the pendant hidden beneath his shirt. "I was only looking." Caleb stepped inside. "Books are meant to be opened." Noah hesitated before gently taking the novel from the shelf. Inside the front cover, someone had written a simple sentence years ago. "Stories remind us that every ending can become a beginning." Noah read the words twice before quietly smiling. It was small, uncertain, and gone almost as quickly as it appeared, but Caleb noticed it. It was the first genuine smile he had seen since the previous night's rain. Neither of them spoke about it. Some moments became more meaningful when left undisturbed. As evening settled over the estate, Noah returned the book to its place and instinctively reached for his pendant once more. This time Caleb noticed the small silver crest engraved inside before Noah quickly closed it again. Caleb recognized the symbol immediately. It was not merely similar to the Sterling family emblem. It was an original crest that had disappeared nearly 25 years earlier, along with a branch of the family everyone believed had vanished forever. Caleb said nothing about the pendant that evening, but after Noah quietly returned to his room, he walked alone into the private archive hidden behind the library wall. Shelves filled with decades of family records surrounded him, while a single brass lamp cast warm light across stacks of leather-bound ledgers and carefully preserved photographs. Caleb removed an old genealogy book that had not been opened in years and slowly compared the sterling crest engraved inside Noah's pendant with the original family seal recorded generations earlier. Every detail matched perfectly, from the arrangement of the oak leaves to the tiny star engraved above the shield. That pendant could not have been copied. It belonged to someone with a legitimate connection to the Sterling family. Caleb closed the book and leaned back in thoughtful silence. The more he learned about Noah, the less sense the Romano family story made. Why would their greatest rivals throw away someone carrying a sterling heirloom instead of using that information as leverage? Somewhere between those unanswered questions lay a truth that nobody wanted discovered. The following morning, Noah woke before sunrise and quietly left his room. Unable to relax, he wandered through the mansion looking for something useful to do. In the kitchen, he noticed one of the cooks preparing breakfast for the staff. Without asking permission, Noah carefully rolled up the sleeves of his new sweater and began washing vegetables. His movements were practiced, quick, and almost invisible, as though he had learned long ago that the best way to avoid attention was to become helpful before anyone asked. When the cook noticed him, she smiled kindly. "You do not have to work." Noah immediately stopped. "I am sorry. I thought I was in the way." "You were helping," she replied gently. Noah looked genuinely surprised by the difference. A few minutes later, Caleb entered the kitchen earlier than usual. He expected to find breakfast already waiting in the dining room, but instead discovered Noah quietly arranging freshly sliced fruit on his serving plates with remarkable care. Noah noticed him and immediately stepped backward. "I should not have touched anything." Caleb looked at the neatly prepared table, then at the cook, who simply shrugged with an amused smile. "He asked permission for every apple he picked up," she explained. Caleb turned toward Noah. "Did anyone tell you not to help?" Noah shook his head. "No." "Did anyone become angry?" "No." Caleb nodded once. "Then perhaps you are worrying about rules that no longer exist." Noah lowered his eyes. "Old rules are difficult to forget." Caleb understood that answer better than Noah realized. Behind the calm confidence people associated with the Sterling Syndicate, Caleb carried his own invisible rules. Never hesitate. Never show fear. Never allow emotions to influence decisions. Those principles had built a powerful organization. Yet standing inside the quiet kitchen, watching Noah apologize simply for arranging breakfast, Caleb began wondering how many unnecessary rules he himself still obeyed every day. Later that afternoon, several senior members of the syndicate arrived for a scheduled strategy meeting. As they entered the mansion, a few noticed Noah carrying clean towels toward the guest rooms. Conversation stopped for only a moment before continuing, but Noah immediately sensed the curious glances and quietly stepped aside to avoid blocking the hallway. One of the older advisors approached Caleb after the meeting. "Boss," he said respectfully, "bringing someone from Romano territory into this house may create unnecessary questions." Caleb calmly replied, "Questions are solved with answers, not assumptions." The advisor nodded but remained unconvinced. From the second-floor landing, Noah accidentally overheard enough of the conversation to understand that he had once again become a source of concern simply by existing. That evening, he packed the few belongings he owned into a small canvas bag. The new clothes remained neatly folded on the bed because he believed they belonged to the house rather than to him. When Caleb knocked softly on the open bedroom door, he found Noah standing beside the packed bag with the silver pendant resting in his palm. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked. Noah answered without looking up. "I think it would be easier if I left before I caused problems for you." Caleb stepped into the room and looked at the untouched sweater, the carefully folded sneakers, and the perfectly made bed. "You believe everyone would be happier if you disappeared." Noah hesitated before quietly nodding. Caleb took a slow breath. "That may have been true wherever you came from." Noah finally looked at him. "But it is not true here." Noah's expression trembled between disbelief and hope. Before he could answer, Caleb's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time since bringing Noah home, his calm expression changed. The message contained a single photograph from an unknown sender. It showed Noah standing in the Sterling library the previous evening, accompanied by one sentence beneath the image. "We know exactly where our property is." Caleb quietly locked his phone before Noah could notice the message. There would be time to deal with the threat later. Right now, the frightened Omega standing in front of him mattered more than the anonymous warning. "You are not leaving tonight," Caleb said calmly. Noah lowered his eyes. "If I stay, they will come because of me," Caleb answered without hesitation. "If someone chooses to come here, that decision belongs to them, not to you." Noah wanted to believe those words, but years of living as someone blamed for everything had taught him otherwise. He slowly unpacked the small canvas bag, carefully placing the borrowed sweater back into the dresser. Even that simple act seemed unfamiliar, as though allowing himself to own something required permission he had never received. Over the next several days, life inside the Sterling estate settled into a quiet routine. Noah helped in the kitchen every morning, spent afternoons reading in the library, and often walked through the gardens where the autumn flowers had begun to bloom. Yet Caleb noticed something that worried him. Noah rarely finished an entire meal. Even when surrounded by abundance, he instinctively ate only small portions before insisting he was full. He also startled whenever someone approached too quickly, and several nights the security staff quietly reported hearing footsteps moving through the hallways long after midnight. One evening, Caleb found Noah sitting alone in the sunroom overlooking the gardens. The untouched cup of herbal tea beside him had already grown cold. "You cannot sleep," Caleb observed. Noah smiled faintly without looking up. "I keep thinking I will wake up somewhere else." Caleb pulled out the chair across from him. "Does this place still feel unreal?" Noah nodded. "Every peaceful day feels borrowed." Caleb remained silent for a moment before saying, "Peace is not borrowed when someone freely offers it." Noah wanted to answer, but a sudden wave of dizziness interrupted him. His vision blurred for several seconds, and he instinctively reached for the edge of the table to steady himself. Caleb immediately stood, though his voice remained calm. "Sit still." Noah quickly shook his head. "I am fine." He attempted to stand anyway, but his knees weakened beneath him. Caleb stepped forward just in time to support him before he lost his balance completely. There was no panic, only quiet reassurance. "You do not have to prove your strength every minute," Caleb said gently. The family physician arrived within half an hour and completed another careful examination. After reviewing Noah's condition, he closed his medical case and spoke privately with Caleb. "His physical health is improving, but prolonged stress leaves lasting effects. His body still reacts as though every day requires survival. He needs regular rest, proper nutrition, and something even more difficult to accept." Caleb looked at him. "Safety." The physician nodded. "Not just being safe, believing he is safe." That evening, Caleb made several quiet changes throughout the estate without announcing any of them. The security team was instructed to avoid sudden hallway patrols near Noah's room. The kitchen staff began preparing smaller meals more frequently instead of expecting Noah to finish large portions. The library remained open every evening because Caleb had noticed Noah relaxed most while reading. Nothing was presented as special treatment. The adjustments simply became part of the household routine. Noah slowly began noticing them anyway. Nobody asked him to earn his place. Nobody reminded him that he owed gratitude. For perhaps the first time in years, kindness arrived without conditions attached. Several mornings later, Noah wandered into the greenhouse behind the mansion where rows of herbs and flowering plants filled the warm glass structure with fresh fragrance. The elderly groundskeeper smiled and handed him a small watering can. "Would you help me?" he asked. Noah accepted with quiet surprise. They spent nearly an hour tending delicate plants in comfortable silence. When they finished, the groundskeeper laughed softly. "Flowers grow better when someone believes they are worth caring for." Noah looked thoughtfully at the tiny white blossoms before whispering, "Maybe people do too." As he returned toward the mansion, Caleb watched from the study window and noticed something almost invisible but deeply meaningful. Noah was no longer walking with his shoulders tightly drawn inward. His posture had relaxed ever so slightly. It was the smallest change imaginable, yet it felt like the beginning of healing. That evening, while putting away the gardening gloves, Noah accidentally dropped the silver pendant. The clasp sprang open across the wooden floor, revealing not only the faded photograph Caleb had seen before, but also a folded piece of yellowed paper hidden beneath it. Noah stared at the tiny document with obvious confusion. "I have never seen that before," he whispered. Caleb carefully unfolded the fragile paper, and both of them fell silent as they realized it was an original birth certificate bearing Noah's full name and identifying his father as a member of the Sterling family. The tiny birth certificate rested on the library table between Caleb and Noah, its yellowed edges trembling slightly in Noah's unsteady hands. Neither of them spoke for several long moments. The document carried an official county seal, an original registration number, and a name Noah had never seen before. Beneath the space identifying his father appeared the words Jonathan Sterling. Noah quietly read the line again and again, as though repetition might somehow transform it into a different truth. "That cannot be right," he whispered. "I was always told I had no family." Caleb carefully unfolded the accompanying note hidden behind the certificate. Time had faded much of the ink, but one sentence remained clear enough to read. "If anything happens to us, protect our son from everyone searching for this name." Caleb looked at Noah, whose expression had become completely still. For years Noah had believed he was abandoned because he had no value. Now the possibility emerged that someone had spent their final moments trying to hide him instead. Caleb immediately instructed his most trusted advisor, Benjamin Cross, to search every archived Sterling record connected to Jonathan Sterling. Benjamin had served the Sterling family for decades and possessed an unmatched knowledge of its history. By late afternoon, he returned carrying several sealed folders removed from the oldest family vault. Together they uncovered a forgotten chapter that almost nobody still living remembered. 26 years earlier, Jonathan Sterling had disappeared together with his wife after refusing a secret alliance proposed by the Romano organization. Official records claimed both adults had died in an unexplained accident, while every trace of their infant son had vanished from public documents shortly afterward. Benjamin slowly removed an old newspaper clipping showing a young Jonathan smiling beside his wife while holding a newborn wrapped in a white blanket. Noah stared silently at the photograph. Around the baby's neck rested the very same silver pendant he had carried his entire life. The room fell completely quiet. Caleb finally understood why the Romano family had hidden Noah instead of eliminating every connection to him. Noah had unknowingly become living proof that an entire chapter of history had been rewritten. Before anyone could continue examining the files, security reported that an unexpected visitor had arrived requesting a private meeting. To everyone's surprise, the visitor was Victor Hale, a former financial advisor who had worked for the Romano family before quietly retiring several years earlier. Caleb allowed him inside after ensuring the meeting remained carefully supervised. Victor appeared exhausted, carrying only a worn leather briefcase. He looked directly at Noah before lowering his head with visible regret. "I have wanted to tell you the truth for many years," he said softly. Noah remained silent. Victor continued, "You were never treated as property because you lacked value. You were treated that way because certain people believed that if you ever discovered who you truly were, decades of carefully constructed lies would collapse." He slowly opened the briefcase and removed several old photographs together with legal correspondence bearing Romano signatures. The documents revealed that Jonathan Sterling had attempted to protect evidence, exposing a secret financial agreement between corrupt leaders within both organizations. Rather than allowing the information to become public, several influential figures had erased every official record connecting Noah to the Sterling family and quietly raised him inside the Romano estate under complete isolation. Noah lowered his eyes toward the photographs, struggling to reconcile the fragments of a childhood he barely remembered with the life he had actually lived. Victor's voice grew heavier. "Your parents did not abandon you. They lost everything trying to make sure you would survive." Tears gathered silently in Noah's eyes, not from anger, but from the realization that the story shaping his entire identity had been false from the beginning. Caleb gently rested one hand on the table beside him without forcing conversation. Noah did not move away. Victor then reached into the bottom of the briefcase and produced one final envelope addressed to Caleb. "There is something else you need to know," he said quietly. Not everyone inside the Sterling organization wanted Noah found either. Caleb frowned as he opened the envelope. Inside was a collection of confidential emails exchanged years earlier between Romano executives and one trusted Sterling board member. Every message discussed keeping Noah's existence permanently hidden because revealing the truth would threaten powerful people on both sides. Caleb slowly turned to the final page and felt the room grow colder. The correspondence ended with a signed authorization approving the cover-up, and the signature belonged to Gregory Sterling, the respected elder who had served as Caleb's mentor since childhood and remained one of the highest-ranking leaders within the Sterling syndicate. Caleb spent the entire night inside the conference room overlooking the Sterling estate, surrounded by decades of records, confidential correspondence, and the newly uncovered evidence connecting Gregory Sterling to the conspiracy that had erased Noah's identity. Every document pointed toward the same painful conclusion. The greatest threat had never come only from the Romano family. It had survived because trusted people on both sides had chosen silence over truth. At sunrise, Caleb gathered the senior leadership of the Sterling syndicate. The atmosphere remained unusually tense as Gregory Sterling entered with the same calm authority that had earned respect for more than 30 years. Nobody suspected that the carefully prepared folders resting in front of Caleb contained enough evidence to rewrite the organization's history. Caleb rose slowly. "Today is not about power," he said quietly. "It is about honesty." He placed the photographs, financial records, and Victor Hale's testimony onto the long oak table one piece at a time. The room fell silent as every leader recognized Jonathan Sterling's name. Gregory remained expressionless for several moments before finally speaking. Some truths were buried because they protected the organization. Caleb met his gaze without anger. An organization that survives by abandoning its own family has already forgotten what it was built to protect. No one interrupted. Gregory released a long breath and lowered his eyes. If Noah had been acknowledged, both organizations would have collapsed into endless conflict. Difficult choices had to be made. Caleb answered calmly. "You did not make a difficult choice. You made it for someone who never had the chance to choose for himself." While the meeting continued, Noah waited quietly in the library with Benjamin Cross. The old advisor noticed Noah staring at the faded photograph of his parents once again. "You look like your mother," Benjamin said gently. Noah smiled faintly. "I do not remember either of them." Benjamin nodded with understanding. Memory is not the only way family survives. Sometimes it survives through the people willing to tell the truth. Noah looked toward the tall windows overlooking the gardens. For the first time, he no longer wondered whether he deserved to remain inside the estate. Instead, he wondered whether he possessed the courage to face the life that had been hidden from him. Several hours later, Caleb returned carrying only one folder instead of the thick stack he had taken into the meeting. His expression remained composed, but Noah immediately sensed that something important had changed. Caleb sat across from him without speaking for a moment. "The council voted unanimously," he finally said. "Gregory has been permanently removed from every leadership position. Every false record concerning your identity will be corrected." Noah looked down at his hands. "I never wanted anyone to lose everything because of me." Caleb shook his head. "This was never because of you. It happened because truth waited too long." Before Noah could answer, Benjamin hurried into the room, holding a secure communication tablet. "There is another development," he said. "The Romano leadership has publicly denied any knowledge of Noah's family history. They are blaming the entire cover-up on individuals who acted alone." Caleb quietly accepted the report. "Then they are protecting their reputation instead of accepting responsibility." Noah looked up. "What happens now?" Caleb turned the tablet toward him. Several respected community leaders, charitable organizations, and longtime business partners had already begun requesting public clarification after anonymous documents exposing the conspiracy appeared online. The story had spread faster than anyone expected. The carefully guarded secret no longer belonged to either syndicate. It belonged to the truth itself. Caleb smiled faintly. "Now we stop fighting over who owns the past and start deciding what the future should become." Later that afternoon, Caleb invited Noah to accompany him to the estate gardens where the entire household staff had quietly gathered beneath the autumn trees. The cooks, groundskeepers, security officers, librarians, and housekeepers stood together in comfortable silence. Caleb looked toward Noah before addressing everyone. "Many of you welcomed Noah before knowing anything about his history. You treated him with kindness because it was the right thing to do. Today I want you to know that nothing about your kindness was misplaced. One by one, the staff smiled warmly. The elderly groundskeeper stepped forward first and handed Noah a small flowering plant they had cared for together inside the greenhouse. It is ready for a permanent home, he said. Noah accepted the gift with trembling hands, overwhelmed not by obligation, but by genuine belonging. As the gathering ended, Caleb quietly walked beside Noah through the garden paths. There is one decision nobody can make except you, he said. You now know who you were born as. But who you become from this day forward is entirely your choice. Noah looked at the flowering plant, then at the pendant resting in his palm, before lifting his eyes toward Caleb with quiet determination. For the first time since they met behind the Romano estate, he did not lower his gaze. Instead, he smiled and answered, "Then my first choice is to stay." At that exact moment, Benjamin's phone rang, and after listening briefly, he turned toward Caleb with unmistakable surprise. "The Romano family has requested a formal meeting tomorrow morning," he said. "They are not asking for Noah to be returned anymore. They are asking to hear what decision he has made." The following morning, the grand conference hall inside the Sterling estate stood ready for a meeting that neither organization could have imagined only a week earlier. Representatives from the Romano family arrived without their usual confidence, accompanied instead by legal advisors, senior witnesses, and community mediators determined to prevent another generation of hidden lies. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, filling the polished room with calm rather than intimidation. Noah paused outside the entrance, quietly adjusting the sleeve of the cream-colored sweater he had once believed he did not deserve to wear. Caleb approached beside him, but stopped before the doorway instead of walking ahead. "Today," he said gently, "nobody speaks for you unless you ask them to." Noah looked at him with quiet surprise. Throughout his entire life, every important decision had been made by someone else. For the first time, the choice belonged completely to him. Together they entered the room. Every conversation faded into silence as Noah walked beside Caleb instead of several steps behind him. The difference seemed small, yet everyone present noticed it immediately. The acting Romano leader stood and slowly lowered his head. "We cannot undo what happened," he began carefully. "But we acknowledge that Noah Carter was wrongfully deprived of his identity, his family history, and his freedom to choose his own future." Noah listened without interrupting. The apology sounded sincere, yet it arrived years too late to erase what had already been lost. Another representative gently placed a folder on the conference table. Inside were restored legal records, family documents, and every remaining possession recovered from Jonathan and his wife's estate. Noah quietly turned each page before stopping at a photograph of his parents smiling beneath a summer sky. Tears gathered in his eyes, but he smiled at the same time. It was the first memory anyone had ever been able to return to him. The Romano leader continued, "These belongings belong to you alone. We will respect whatever decision you make today." Every eye in the room turned toward Noah. The silence lasted several long seconds before he finally spoke. "For many years I believed I was something people could throw away whenever I stopped being useful." His voice remained soft, but every word carried quiet certainty. "Then I believed discovering my past would somehow repair everything I had lost. I understand now that neither belief was true." Noah gently closed the folder. "My past explains where I came from. It does not decide where I belong." Caleb remained completely silent beside him, allowing Noah every moment he needed. Noah looked toward the Romano representatives with calm eyes free from resentment. "I do not hate any of you. Carrying hatred would only allow the past to keep deciding my future." He then turned toward Caleb. "The first person who treated me like a human being did not ask my family name before offering kindness. He simply offered it." Caleb felt the weight of those words more deeply than anyone else in the room. Noah smiled gently. "That is why my decision has nothing to do with old organizations or forgotten history. It has everything to do with the people who gave me a place where I never had to earn the right to exist." The mediators quietly recorded every statement, while several Sterling advisors lowered their heads with visible respect. Caleb finally stepped forward, not to answer for Noah, but to stand beside him as an equal. "From this day forward," Caleb said calmly, "no person, family, or organization will describe Noah as property, obligation, or leverage again. He will be recognized only as the individual he freely chooses to become. No applause followed. The moment did not need one. It carried a deeper kind of victory built upon dignity instead of triumph. After the meeting concluded, Noah walked outside into the estate gardens where the autumn breeze carried the scent of cedar and blooming flowers. He removed the silver pendant from around his neck and carefully placed the restored birth certificate inside beside the faded family photograph. Then he closed it with a peaceful smile. Caleb joined him several moments later. "Do you regret staying?" he asked quietly. Noah shook his head. "No. For the first time, staying was my own decision." Caleb smiled warmly. "Then this place is your home for as long as you want it to be." Noah looked across the gardens where the staff waved as they passed by, no longer seeing a frightened stranger, but someone who belonged among them. Just as the peaceful afternoon settled over the estate, Benjamin hurried toward them carrying an official envelope marked with the Sterling family seal. He handed it to Caleb with an expression of genuine surprise. "The family council has reached one final unanimous decision," he said softly. "They want Noah present tonight because the announcement concerns his future and the future of the entire Sterling family." Several months later, winter quietly gave way to spring, and the Sterling estate no longer felt like a fortress built to protect power. It had become a home filled with warmth, laughter, and ordinary moments that once seemed impossible. The greenhouse Noah had helped restore now overflowed with healthy flowers. The kitchen echoed with friendly conversations each morning, and the library windows remained open to welcome fresh air carrying the scent of blooming gardens. The little flowering plant the elderly groundskeeper had once placed into Noah's hands had grown into a vibrant white blossom resting beside the window, where sunlight reached it every afternoon. Caleb often paused there before beginning his workday, smiling because the plant reminded him how quietly healing could happen when someone was finally given the chance to grow. That evening, members of the Sterling Family Council gathered once more inside the Great Hall, but unlike every meeting before, there were no tense negotiations, no hidden agendas, and no carefully guarded secrets. Friends, advisors, household staff, and community representatives filled the room together. Benjamin Cross stepped forward holding an official document bearing the restored Sterling family seal. With calm dignity, he announced that every historical record had been corrected, Jonathan Sterling and his wife had been publicly honored for their integrity, and Noah Carter had been formally recognized as a rightful member of the Sterling family. The announcement was met not with loud celebration, but with heartfelt smiles that carried the quiet weight of justice finally reaching the person who had waited a lifetime without knowing it. Noah accepted the certificate with trembling hands before looking around the room. For years he had believed that belonging was something earned through perfect obedience. Standing there now, surrounded by people who expected nothing from him except honesty, he finally understood that true family welcomed someone because they were loved, not because they had proven their worth. After the ceremony ended, the household gathered in the dining room where a long wooden table had been prepared with homemade food, fresh bread, warm soup, roasted vegetables, fruit pies, and every favorite recipe the kitchen staff had learned Noah enjoyed over the past several months. The housekeeper quietly laughed as Noah reached for an extra piece of bread without apologizing first. Caleb noticed the moment immediately. It seemed almost invisible to everyone else, yet to him it represented one of the greatest victories they had ever achieved together. Noah no longer feared that taking something meant someone else would go without. He had finally begun believing there would always be enough kindness waiting for tomorrow. Later that evening, Caleb invited Noah to walk through the gardens beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The fountain reflected soft lights while the spring breeze gently moved through the flowering trees. Caleb stopped beside the old oak tree overlooking the estate and looked at Noah with complete sincerity. "The night I found you behind the Romano estate, I believed I was rescuing a stranger," he said quietly. "Now I realize you rescued this family from becoming people who forgot what compassion was meant to look like." Noah smiled with grateful eyes. "You gave me a place where I could choose who I wanted to become." Caleb gently shook his head. "No, you chose that yourself. I only opened the gate." Noah reached into his pocket and removed the silver pendant that had accompanied him through every chapter of his life. Inside rested the faded photograph of his parents beside the restored birth certificate. He closed it carefully before placing it over his heart. I will always remember where I came from, he whispered. But I am no longer living inside yesterday. Caleb nodded with quiet pride. Together they walked back toward the warmly lit mansion where the staff waited on the front steps, laughing as the groundskeeper proudly showed everyone the flowers Noah had helped grow. The house no longer felt too large or unfamiliar. Every room carried memories built through trust instead of fear. Every hallway reminded Noah that no one expected him to disappear. Every sunrise promised another ordinary day that no longer needed to be survived, only lived. As spring continued to brighten the estate, Caleb and Noah gradually built a future through simple routines, shared meals, long conversations, and quiet acts of kindness that asked for nothing in return. Their story became a reminder whispered throughout the Sterling organization that real strength was never measured by wealth, influence, or fear. It was measured by the courage to protect hope when someone else had almost forgotten it existed. Sometimes the greatest change begins with nothing more than stopping long enough to notice the person everyone else has chosen to overlook. And sometimes the truest family is not the one written into history, but the one that opens its doors, offers a place at the table, and chooses one another again with every new day.